I know I don't normally start these vlogs with a chat straight off, but this is unbelievably the 20th episode of the Plot 37 YouTube vlog, which is something I never thought I would say. For those of you who haven't been watching from the beginning, these started off as lockdown vlogs. I was laid off from my job right at the very beginning of lockdown, and my job has just evaporated into nothingness, so there's no prospect of going back to that anytime soon. And so I started doing vlogs from the allotment, and it's been incredible. Like I say, this is episode 20, can't believe that. But really I'm just saying a massive thank you to everybody who has been watching and has subscribed to the channel, and anybody who's left a comment below. I've had some fantastic advice and tips from you all underneath, and I'm just putting it out there that I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'll get on with the video now. Well, it is Wednesday afternoon and it's absolutely tipping it down. But like I've said before, still have to water the greenhouse and the polytunnel. So that's what I'm doing now. I can't believe how much things change overnight. I picked everything that was ready in here, like on, when would it have been? Tuesday morning. It's now Wednesday afternoon. And look, we've got all of these up here. Can you see them? Masses of those guys. Something else that's happened that's quite exciting is the black jalapenos have magically, like overnight, turned red. Wasn't expecting that. And what else? Obviously, can you see all the orange in the background there? I'm also going to pick the flowers that are on the Thai basil. I've been taking them off the normal basil, but the Thai ones, I mean, I know you shouldn't let basil flower because it just halts the production of leaves completely, basically, but they're so pretty I just had to let them go. But now I'm going to chop the whole lot back quite low and just take them home as a bunch of flowers. Not bad for a bunch of herbs. They're magnificent. Also, one more thing I got to do before head off today is pick some leeks. The ground is so soft I don't need a trowel, I'm just going to pull them out. These are a variety called nipper, which you pick when they're sort of pencil size. A couple of these have got quite big, but an advantage of growing pencil leeks, because they're in the ground for such a short amount of time as opposed to like a musselburgh or something, the leaf miner grubs don't really have a time to develop, so it's irrelevant. Bit soggy, isn't it, Mum?
It's very soggy. Very soggy indeed.
Well, yeah, it's pretty wet. I've got some leeks. These are the pencil leeks. They're going to go in a pie tonight, but I think we're going to beat a bit of a retreat, actually. See you tomorrow. Well, it's a considerably finer day today. A little bit windy though, so sorry if the camera's shaking around. I am picking Achocha. These are a new one for me this year. I've got 4 plants in here and we've been getting masses and masses of fruit from them. They're quite a delicate flavour, somewhere between a cucumber when they're raw and more of a green pepper when they're cooked. So they kind of come off like this, looking like a pod, and you cut them in half, scoop out the insides. They've got these quite dark seeds, which you don't want to eat. They're like wood, but you can grow from them next year. And yeah, like I say, use them like a green pepper. We've been putting them in everything. So something I really recommend. Job number 2 for today is to tie in these raspberry canes. It's taken us this long to do it because when we planted these out, they were runners that were given to us from a plot up the way. And all 4 plants looked like they'd died initially. And so I never put in the supports for them because I thought there wasn't going to be any point. One of them sadly did die, but the other 3 in the last month or so have absolutely taken off and are fruiting, which is a real surprise because they really did look like they had gone. So anyway, I'm slightly belatedly putting in the raspberry supports today, stretching wire between 2 sides of the cage and then tying them in. So like I say, one of the plants died. We've only got 3 in here now, so I will try and cultivate another one to go on the end. They are autumn fruiting raspberries, so none of that taking out the old canes or anything nonsense like you get with summer raspberries. Simple as. Yeah, so I'm pretty pleased with these. The only thing I would say about this variety is, I mean, I know raspberries are all spiky, but these seem lethal. They're more like a blackberry. So here, this is where I've attached it, just simply looped it round the cross of each side and tied them in. That should keep them pretty tidy. See what I mean? Loads of fruit. For plants that looked completely dead a couple of months ago, they've done fantastically. It's another grim day. It's raining, miserable, grey. Basically, I'm not going up to the plot. But what I will do is do a bit of sowing at home. Last week, you saw I was sowing the chard, which is going to go in the polytunnel for winter. Well, they're all coming up just fine. So what I'll do with them is when they've got another couple of leaves, I'll separate them out, put them into their own individual pots and just mollycoddle them until the tomatoes have cleared out of the polytunnel, and then I'll get these guys in. Something else I'm going to be growing over winter in the poly is some spring onions, so I'm going to get them started off now. I normally grow a variety called Lilia, which is my absolute favourite. It's a purple one. I can show you them on the screen now. But I'm not growing them this week. I am growing White Lisbon because they're the ones I've got and they are still delicious. I've got some Lilia in the post. There's a link to Lilia underneath if you're feeling like you need some purple spring onions in your life. You can go through the link at the bottom. But yeah, basically today it's white spring onions. I'm just going to broad sow them into a seed tray and then let them get to sort of pencil lead thickness. So I'll just let them grow away happily in the seed tray until, like I said, with the chard, the tomatoes clear off, and I will get them into the bed inside the polytunnel, and hopefully that means that we will be eating spring onions and chard, etc. over the winter, which is pretty good. Last year we grew chard in a cloche and we did eat it over the winter, but when it really came into its own was right early in the spring, just as the sun started to get a tiny bit of heat in it before any of the rest of the veg was ready. I think it's called the hunger gap. It was absolutely flourishing, so we'll be eating it over the winter, but I think when it's going to really come into its own is before we get the tomatoes out into the polytunnel next year. We'll just have early spring masses of chard. That's the idea anyway. So I'm just going to get on with sowing these now. Well, the main feature of the weather today is windy. We are going to be taking out the main crop potatoes today. We've only got 4 of each in this bed because at the end of it I was given 2 Phacelia plants, tomatillos, which are here, flowering away really happily but no fruit yet. So fingers crossed for those. But the 2 main crop varieties we grew this year were Apache, which is my all-time favourite potato, and Rat, which is a smoother version of a pink fir apple. This bed, the soil in it's really, really poor and the potatoes really suffered. So I don't have high hopes for the harvest. As you can see, it's absolutely riddled with scab, and there's also a lot of slug damage to the potatoes, and the potato plants themselves actually died off really, really early. So the plants themselves, not only are they growing in really poor soil here, but they got checked initially by cold weather right at the beginning of the season. And then after that, they began to flower, which obviously for a main crop potato, they should be doing that way later than they did. They flowered before the second earlies. Not ideal. We did pick them off, but that doesn't really help. So basically don't have high hopes for this harvest, but they do need to come out of the bed because I'm going to be sowing some green manure in this bed to try and improve the shambolic condition of the soil. Also, while we've been digging the potatoes over, the wind's blown the bloomin' dahlias over. So, but luckily they don't look like they've snapped, so we've stood them up with this sort of bit of trellis stuff, so hopefully that's going to keep them safe. Good morning. It is Sunday. And my main job for today is I'm going to start the project for widening the path that's outside the Polytunnel, which is quite exciting. I don't know if you can see behind me, this path here is much, much wider than the path that's on the other side that's got the arches going up it. And that's because the beds that we had before, when it was sort of laid out, were 9 foot by 4 foot beds. And I've replaced them when I remade the whole lot and we used decking boards instead. They are 8 foot by 4 foot, so they're a foot shorter. But I kept them all lined up against that edge to keep that main path the same width, and then which means we've got a wider section here. So we've let it all just go over to grass initially, but what I'm going to do is widen everything that's on this side, just pull it out. So we've got one of the wildflower beds is just there, so I'm going to just pull it all out by about 1.5 feet to make the 2 paths match up. So the first bit I'm going to do today, I'm not going to dig the whole lot out now, but I'm going to start with just outside the chicken house, which is just there. That's the narrowest bit already, so I'm going to dig a trench about maybe 30 centimetres wide, and eventually we're going to put a row of lavender across there. But what I'm going to sow in the meantime is this Phacelia, which is the first of the green manures I'm going to put in this year. It's also going to go into, you know, the bed that I took the potatoes out of yesterday. It's going to go in there as well, so I'm going to spread it between the two places. The bed that's the actual raised bed, it's not going to be allowed to flower. It's going to get up, and then we're going to chop it down, lay it down. So you leave the roots in the ground because they really add to the situation, and then you just chop them down. You can dig them in. We're not going to dig them in, we're just going to lay them on top and then plant through that. The ones outside the chicken house we're going to let just run to flower, and if they self-seed, the main area that they're going to self-seed into is going to be more flowers next year, so it's not really going to be a problem, and the bees absolutely love them, so win-win really. So yeah, that's what I'm going to start off doing. I'm going to do digging and I'm going to do sowing. I've got some links underneath to where you can buy this from. This year I'm going to be doing this Phacelia, which is a much shorter crop, and in about a month's time I'm going to be sowing field beans. You can buy them from the link below as well. So I'm going to have a cup of coffee and get on with it, I suppose. It's pretty grey today, but it's quite like sticky and humid, so I'm probably going to be an absolute sweaty wreck when I've dug through that concrete. Well, that was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I think that's because we've had like 4 or 5 days of rain. I wouldn't have wanted to have tried and dug it over when we were absolutely baked solid, but that's pretty good. Eventually I will probably put some edging around it, but for the moment I'm not going to bother. I'm going to just go straight ahead and sow the seed. So this is 50 Gs. It says it will cover 22 square meters, which is quite impressive, but I know each of the individual plants is actually quite large. So I'm just going to walk across that to flatten it all back down again, give it a bit of a rake, sow the seed, walk across it again to really make sure there's a lot of contact between the soil and the seed, and then give it a good soaking. And then I'm going to do exactly the same in the bed where the potatoes were. First bit of green manure is in. Right, onto the bed. Well, it was a bit of a shorter video this week, mainly because every time I tried to film anything, it was either torrential rain or the camera was doing this while I was trying to film. So I had to throw away quite a lot of the footage. So yeah, slightly shorter week. Talking of the wind though, I saw quite a lot of pictures of terrible destruction of bean poles and snapped sunflower heads and all that kind of thing on Instagram. So I really hope you've got away lightly with all of that. We only had that one incident where the dahlias fell over, but luckily they didn't actually snap. So we just kind of stood them back up again and they don't seem to have noticed, which is pretty good. Yeah, so we got away quite lightly. I hope you did too. Actually, it's still blowing a gale out there at the moment, and which is why I'm hiding up here in my studio in a jumper, which is the first time I've worn a jumper in months. So I'm just hiding up here in the warm, and I'm doing a bit of plotting and planning for what I'm going to use the space along the edge of the allotment that I'm gaining from making that path a bit more narrow. One of the main things I really want to get in there is perennial herbs. I have sage to go in, which is just the plain silver sage. I've got some rosemary. There's a couple more specimens that I really want to take cuttings of on other people's plots on the site, which is one thing I'm going to be doing next week. There's a rosemary that has an incredibly like inky dark blue flower, which is just stunning. So I'm going to be taking some cuttings of that. There's also like a pink blush sage that I'm going to be taking cuttings of. But what I was going to ask is that if anybody's got any suggestions for herbs that I should most definitely be growing in my space now I've got some, please drop me a line below, because I'd be really interested, whether it's for culinary use or medicinal, seed saving, any of that. I'd really like to know about it. So yeah, I guess I will see you next week. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, it means a lot. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. As I said before, I will put the links to buying the green manure or information about green manure underneath. It's from a company called Sow Seeds. They're the best I've found. They've got a really comprehensive website of all the different ones, the lists and all the different things that they can do. So go and have a look at them if you're interested. There's also a link to my website, which is up and running now. I've been writing sort of various blog posts and things on there. On the website is a recipe to make your own gin from vodka, which is my new favourite thing. Particularly my favourite one is bitter orange and saffron gin. There's a recipe on there for that. That's about it from me this week. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you to everybody. What with this being the 20th, thank you to everybody who's been watching all the way through. Means a lot. Got the first video that had 3,000 views on it this week, which was pretty exciting, and I'm just waiting for a decent hour to have a gin and tonic. Don't forget to tell me about any herbs I should be growing. Bye.